Welcome into a Friday edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Tyler Yaremchuk and Frank Seravalli with you. As always, we are over on the Daily Faceoff YouTube looking for your inbox questions for later on. We're going to be joined by Jeremy Rutherford later in the show. But first, I need to tell you that it is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Hope everybody's had a good week so far. Frank, how you doing?
I'm good. Made it to Friday again. They let us get to Friday.
Yes, they did. Let's kick off the show with a bit of a look back at last night. It is our nightcap. It's brought to you by JP Wiser's, proud to be the official whiskey of the NHL, offering Canadian hockey fans a premium drink choice to enhance every game night experience across the country. JP Wiser's, the official whiskey of game night. And actually, Frank, before we get into anything that happened on the ice last night, let's maybe... well, I don't even know if it's putting a bow on the story, but the latest in the John Tortorella Philadelphia Flyers situation. A report from Kevin Kurz earlier this morning saying that that something happened between Cam York and Tortorella in Toronto. Cam York dresses for the game against Montreal, but does not play a second. No shifts. What's the latest on this? What can you tell us?
Yeah, so there was sources indicate a heated verbal exchange between Cam York and John Tortorella that the team felt crossed the line and that needed to be handled with discipline. And so that's why you saw Cam York, not a single second of ice time, not a single shift in Thursday's game against the Montreal Canadiens, the first one without John Tortorella on the bench in 3+ seasons for the Philadelphia Flyers. And they believe it's done, over with, and handled now. Cam York has paid his price, his penalty. And John Tortorella obviously has moved on. He's been fired. And I think it just kind of gives you some indication of just how heated things had been. I think not just between the Flyers and John Tortorella, the Flyers players, but also their front office at times. I think it's been a tough few weeks there.
Yeah, definitely an interesting development out of it, out of everything this morning. I know, listen, people are going to throw all sorts of speculation around there, and we even got the question in our YouTube. Was there anything physical? Was there anything physical? Safe to say that didn't happen?
Yeah, I wanted to check in on that because you never know where people's imaginations run. They just hear something got out of hand and they think, okay, was this a shoving match? No, nothing like that. Not physical, as mentioned, a heated verbal exchange.
To the ice last night, the Calgary Flames were dealt a bit of a big blow in their chase for a wild card spot. They lose on home ice to the Dallas Stars. It snaps their winning streak, but it does not come without a little bit of controversy. Flames fans heated, and I think rightfully so, Frank, on this goalie interference call. But you're the goalie interference guy now. You wrote the handbook that everyone's reading on Daily Faceoff, so you tell me what I should think of this call.
Yeah, look, there's my opinion, which is that this is a ticky-tack goalie interference call and that this should count. But then there's the opinion of the general managers, which have set the compass for the NHL. And then there's the situation room where this checks the boxes. There's Casey DeSmith playing in his crease squarely in the blue paint, which is one of the criteria. 2, he is bumped by Joel Farabee, who makes contact on his own volition. And 3, then as the NHL situation room sees it, he doesn't have the ability to play his position. Did he have a chance to get reset or not? That part, not up for me to debate. But as innocuous as this seems, as ticky-tack as this seems, this is consistently how they're going to call it. Blue paint? Yes. Contact? Yes. Did he go there on his own? Yes. Done. No goal. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, the way you explain it there is very, very simple, and I like that you are hammering home that messaging because I think everyone will understand things a lot clearer for it. The only thing I didn't love that came out after the game was Salim Valji had a tweet. Flames beat reporter said, Joel Farabee said post-game, the ref told him that had Blake Coleman's shot been glove side, it would have counted. Like, that to me, it shouldn't matter. Maybe it should. Like, how the puck goes in, like, is that context they take in?
Here's what I would say. Take what the referee says with a grain of salt, because in the end, he's not the one making the decisions.
Okay. That's fair. So the Flames lose. They stay 6 points back of the St. Louis Blues, who just keep on winning. Again, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic a little bit later on. One more for you, Frank. Maybe the most surprising result of last night was the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Sorry, I just want to add too, like how insane that game was for the Calgary Flames. Outshot the Dallas Stars 48-19 and lose 5-2. That's one that's going to haunt you if you fall short of the playoffs.
And 2 goals that got called back as well. So a tough night for the Calgary Flames. The Toronto Maple Leafs get swept in their season series by the San Jose Sharks. Weird little blip, or as our coworker Jay Rosehill tweeted, has a Stanley Cup contender ever been swept by the last place team in the NHL? Is that a bit of an overreaction from our boy Rosie?
I don't think an overreaction. Look, the Leafs have lost now twice to the Sharks and to the Nashville Predators in 1 month of time. That's a lot. It shouldn't happen for a team that's trying to challenge for a division and upend what this bracket looks like. And when you think about those games, and yeah, the Leafs do end up getting a point, but when you think about those games and how they add up, those are the types of points that if the Leafs are out in the first round again, or whatever the situation looks like, they're going to rue those missed opportunities, because what you could have is a totally different matchup in round one. You could get the Ottawa Senators, and always be careful what you wish for. But look, it's not pretty. And I think that is the perfect lead into our inner and outer circle Stanley Cup contenders, which, like, for a lot of these reasons and the inconsistencies, like I like where the Leafs are at. I think this is the best constructed Leaf team that they've had over the last 6 years, but I just don't have them as an authentic inner circle contender.
Well, let's flash yours up, Frank. You and I each picking 5 teams that we have as inner circle Stanley Cup contenders. This is your list. You have Dallas, Florida, Tampa Bay, Vegas, and Colorado. The difference is, comparing it to mine, like, I also have both Dallas and Colorado. We both have Florida. I do not have Tampa Bay or Vegas. I guess let's start with Tampa Bay then, maybe, because I know there were points earlier in the year where both of us were a little bit like, okay, how much gas is still left in the tank here? But you're now bullish on the Bolts.
Yeah, I am, because of the way that Andrei Vasilevsky has played. And I understand certainly the difference in your circle and mine, but I'm looking at Vasilevsky's numbers, and I'm looking at this definitely more stout Tampa Bay defense, having Ryan McDonagh back, who, by the way, congratulations on 1,000 games for McDonagh on Thursday night. Look, I just think this Tampa Bay Lightning team, that's the crazy part about the way the bracket shapes up. Could be out in round one, could go and win the Stanley Cup. Like, it's always dangerous to put 2 teams from the same division in your inner circle. Just like we have with Dallas and Colorado, like, one of those teams, we're on a path for a guaranteed one of those teams to be out. So perhaps that's my fault with the way that I've constructed this. But I think if you were to take these teams and stack them up one on top of the other, and maybe that was part of some of your math here, I just think Tampa is in that class of teams that certainly has an authentic chance. And I'll agree and say that, when you look at Vegas as well, like, if Vegas were to get there, that wouldn't surprise anyone. That team gets healthier, Shea Theodore back. It's just a different looking team.
Yeah, so, like, I really struggled with how much weight to put in a team's potential path to the Cup final, because there's a part of me that goes, no, if you're a Cup contender, you'll find ways to beat good teams. But then part of the reason for me of including Washington and not a team like Tampa Bay or Toronto was that, do I think, like, look at Washington's path, and maybe I should have applied this to Vegas too. I was in all sorts of a pretzel, but, like, can Washington beat whoever the 8th seed is? Absolutely. They will be heavy favorites in that series. They can absolutely do it. Can they beat one of Carolina or New Jersey? Absolutely. That's not as difficult as whatever second round matchup one of Florida, Tampa Bay, or 2 of Florida, Tampa Bay, or Toronto are going to have. And I guess you could apply the same thing to the Vegas Golden Knights in that, although I do view the gap, as much as right now, coming off a big loss last night, I view the gap between Vegas and Edmonton as still pretty thin during the course of a 7-game series. But my reasoning for including Washington is just like, man, I've been someone who's been waiting for them to cool down all year. They haven't. And I mean, look at them. They're sitting first by a pretty wide margin, and their path is pretty simple.
Yeah, I get that notion for sure, but I would think that unless there's some significant carnage on the other side of the bracket, that they're going to be a heavy underdog in the Eastern Conference Final. So walk me through, though. You've got the Jets in your inner circle. I've got the Jets and Caps both in my outer circle. Why Jets?
I think some of the talk about Connor Hellebuck's playoff record, and we talked about this earlier in the week. I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, again, early in his career, he was so good in the playoffs. I'm tending to believe that the last two seasons are more of the blip in all of this, and he is a goalie who's capable of coming through in really, really big moments. And I mean, even in the Four Nations final, like, he stepped up. He was good. I know it was in a losing effort, but he made some massive, massive stops in that hockey game. I look at that Jets team and just having Connor Hellebuck, if your superstar is in net, that's the kind of guy that can change a series. As much as a Cale Makar or a Nathan McKinnon are, again, true bona fide superstars, and they are game changers. I just think a superstar goalie is a series changer, and that's why I wanted to include the Jets.
Yeah, I get that. So you have Toronto in your outer circle. I don't have Toronto in at all. For some of the reasons that we just mentioned. We both have the Oilers on the outside looking in. You're just a little more generous than me. You've got 10 teams in the mix out of 16 that are going to make the playoffs. I tried to cut it to 8 to really try and limit the field, because I think at a certain point you're like, oh, well, anyone could win. And maybe that's just the story of this year's playoffs. Not that isn't the story every year in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but just that maybe this year feels a little bit more wide open than others.
And I think it is, like, again, so like Dallas being in my inner circle was a decision I made like 5 minutes before our show. I was like, okay, I got to include them. Like, their roster is so good. And Toronto being in my outer was, again, like a really, really close call. So was Carolina. For Toronto, it was just me sitting there going, okay, if I'm going to put Florida in the middle and I'm going to have Tampa Bay on my board, I need to give some respect to Toronto, who could win that division. Like, they could, over the course of 82 games, show they're a better team than Florida or Tampa Bay in the standings. So how could I not have them? And for Carolina, that was, again, just a bit of a nod to, like, their first round matchup against New Jersey should be very easy. They should be able to get through that with relative ease. And second round against Washington, who knows, I guess. I don't know. I was in a bit of a pretzel on this, but I do have a lot in, because anyone can get there.
Yeah, maybe the only true consensus that we have, as painful as it is for you to hear it, is that neither one of us are really bullish on the Oilers. Like, could they do it? Yes, but the way things are shaping up right now, like, I don't think anyone's sitting here thinking that this is their year.
No, and I mean, they have 10 games remaining in the season. Even if they were to, again, get healthy, get guys back, and go 8-1-1 in their last 10, I still don't think they would be in my inner circle, partially because a bunch of those wins would probably come against the San Jose Sharks. They play them 3 times in their final 10 games. But for the Oilers, and I guess for a handful of other teams like the Leafs as well, they're going to be judged on what they do in April. I mean, they have a chance if they go out and, let's say, they steamroll the LA Kings in round 1, which, again, doubt that would happen. But let's say it does, and it just clicks for the Oilers and they get the goaltending. Then people are probably going to look at them a lot differently going into round 2.
8-1-1. That would be a very St. Louis Blues-like run, and we'll have Jeremy Rutherford in a second to talk about that.
Yeah, we are. But it's Friday, Frank, and I wanted to have a little bit of fun. So in 2 minutes, we'll get to Jeremy. But first, I wanted to play a little Would You Rather, Frank. I got 2 questions that are not necessarily based in reality, but they're still fun questions nonetheless. The third one might be the dumbest thing I've ever asked you, but I think it's a real thinker. It's a good piece of bar conversation if you hang out with a lot of hockey nerds on the weekend. But the first one I got for you, given the recent news in Philadelphia, you and Jason Gregor had like a really quick back and forth on this on the DFO rundown, but I wanted you to dig in on it a little bit. If I were to tell you, Frank, you have to become the GM of the Philadelphia Flyers or the Pittsburgh Penguins and turn them back into a contender, which one would you choose? Who is better set up to get there quicker?
It's definitely the Flyers. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting that is required for Pittsburgh to still do, which they're going to punt on that as well and try and retool this team and spool it back up again pretty quickly. Besides, if you have to pick one place to live, I mean, come on, is this even really a question?
Oh, so you're gonna throw that into it, a little lifestyle add into the answer. I don't mind that. The second one I got for you, 2 of the 3 players who are firmly in the Calder race. And I think this is an interesting conversation on, like, where do you start if you could build a team? Do you go in net? Do you pick the defenseman? If you were starting a franchise today and I told you you can either have Lane Hudson or Dustin Wolf, which one would you rather have?
I'm picking Lane Hudson, and as much as Dustin Wolf seems to be a unicorn, has been highly decorated at the AHL level, now steps into the NHL level and is basically dragging his team into a fight for a Stanley Cup playoff spot. As impressive as that is, I think you can probably get some modicum of goaltending from a bunch of different sources that aren't a high-end player or prospect. And so I think that's the differentiator. I don't think you can get your hands on a Lane Hudson level difference maker quite as easily. Not to say Dustin Wolf grows on trees. That's not my point. It's just that the position is easier to fill, I think, than finding yourself someone that can do what Lane Hudson has done. 50 assists in a rookie season as a defenseman. We're talking about 5 players in NHL history that have done that. It's special stuff. That said, the funny part about what I'm saying is if the Flames get in, I'm voting for Dustin Wolf, number 1 on my Calder.
Ooh, I like that. And you know what? Just to kind of even back up your point, look at the 2 teams leading each conference. Winnipeg is getting elite goaltending from a generational goalie in Connor Hellebuck, and Washington's getting it from a guy they gave up 2 third-round picks for at the draft. Like, you can kind of find it anywhere is your point, and I agree with it. Okay, here's the last one, and I ran this by some people, Frank, at the bar last night. I was out at Greta with the What Chaos quiz. You're a GM of a team, and a magic genie comes to you and says you can have one of these 2 options as an advantage over your competitors. Option 1, you get $5 million of cap space more than every other team in the league, but you can never buy out a player. Option 2, you can move up your first-round pick 10 slots in every draft, but you can never trade your first-round pick. So you have to make the pick. Which one would give you the biggest advantage? I told you this was stupid.
You can do option B every year.
Every year, but again, as you become a cup contender, you can never trade your first round pick.
Oh, I'm taking option B then, because if I can go from, let's say, like I'm winning the Stanley Cup and I'm 32 and I can go from 32 to 22, but I could keep that every year. Or let's say I'm going from 16 to 6 and I could make the playoffs and still pick in the top 6. I'm taking option B because we see all the time how cap space can be squandered with poor deals, and you can always move out a player. You can always exercise a buyout. But let's go back to the conversation we were just having about Lane Hudson and Dustin Wolf. You can never get your hands on true difference makers enough times. And I think, by the way, St. Louis is a great example, a team that's drafted really well late in first rounds. I think their average pick over the last 5 to 7 years is something like 46. They are in a spot because they have drafted well that they're able to kind of turn this over a little bit. If you have option B, your team's going to be competitive for a real long time.
Fair. Pat put up a poll in the chat, so we'll get the YouTube's opinion on this as well. In the meantime, let's get to our big segment. It's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, where you can get a custom ring built and delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program. Find out more information by visiting them online at charmdiamondcenters.com. It was a pleasure to welcome Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic to our show, and we're talking about the hottest team in the NHL. The St. Louis Blues have won 8 in a row, Jeremy, and let me just start with, a team that was kind of right on the outside of the wild card picture all year is now, boom, firmly in a playoff spot. What flipped in their game to allow them to go on this run?
Yeah, first I was going to say you guys are down on Edmonton's chances. I thought Draisaitl and Holloway and Broberg, they've all had good – oh, wait a minute here.
No.
What's flipped here in St. Louis? That's a real good question because there are very few people here in St. Louis, including myself, who saw this coming. A lot of comparisons to the second half surge in 2019 when they won a Stanley Cup. I don't think anybody's fooling themselves into thinking that this is a legit Stanley Cup contender, but give them a lot of credit because even after the coach bump from Jim Montgomery, there was a period in January where things went south again, and it looked like, okay, they're going to miss the playoffs, but this is a continuation of the retool. But after the Four Nations break, guys, they look rejuvenated. Jim Montgomery, they went back to work on the forecheck. The penalty kill has gotten better. And most importantly, Robert Thomas, Pavel Buchnevich have put up some bigger numbers than they were earlier in the year. So 14-2-2, that's a .833 points percentage since the break, and they've been outstanding.
Yeah, sources say pretty good. When you think about, and you mentioned it, 2019, and that's the first place that a lot of people's heads go. I'm not saying, and you're not saying that there is any link, but if there were to be a common thread aside from the record, what would it be?
I think the common link is rolling the four lines and coming at you in waves. I think that's the biggest difference because in 2019, some people will remember that the Blues' fourth line was Alexander Steen, Ivan Barbashev, and Oscar Sundqvist. And they were playing 10 plus minutes a night and making a contribution. And you look at this line in St. Louis, they call it the WTF line. You guys can put that together, I'm sure. The WTF line, it's Nathan Walker, Faxa, and Toropchenko, and they've been good. And also the third line's been good with Sundqvist in the middle of that group, and Zach Bolduc. Keep an eye on that name. He's really emerged in the past couple months. Frank was just talking about first-round picks. The Blues have picked a lot in the 20s, in the 30s. You know, Zach Bolduc was in the 20s. Jimmy Snuggerud, who could be on his way to St. Louis, in the 20s. Robert Thomas in the 20s. Jordan Kyrou was in the 30s. So a lot of good picks in that latter part of the first round, early part of the second round. And those are the guys that are kind of steering the ship right now.
So we're all expecting Jimmy Snuggerud to sign after Minnesota's shocking loss on Thursday night. Was he someone that immediately enters the Blues lineup that they think can help them win?
That's a huge question here right now, because do you disrupt the chemistry? You know, certainly you bring in a first round pick who's done very well for himself at Minnesota. And you see, you know, a couple months ago, you can't wait till Minnesota season ends and you can get Jimmy Snuggerud into the lineup. But with the way the Blues are playing right now, I find it really difficult to see a spot where you put him in there, because as you guys know, these lines are producing right now because of who's playing together with each other. I think you take one link out and the line might not be as effective, but you never know. You get Snuggerud in here to sign, you get him in a practice, he looks great, and potentially they put him in the lineup. But right now, I find it hard to believe that they would insert him when he's ready here Saturday in Colorado or next week on the homestand.
Looking between the pipes, Joel Hofer has been putting together just a string of really, really solid starts for this team. I know, just looking at, again, the game logs, him and Binnington have kind of been rotating a little bit. Obviously, everyone remembers what Binnington did in the big moments at the Four Nations. But, you know, looking at the graphic that's on our screen here, Hofer's numbers are better. Is there any world where Joel Hofer's the playoff starter for this team?
I don't think so. We know that Jordan Binnington is that big game goalie. They've split the starts a lot more than I think many people anticipated. You felt like once they got down to the home stretch and they were trying to make the playoffs, that it would be Jordan Binnington's net. But I think they see the situation like this, that giving Jordan Binnington rest is helping him. And when Joel Hofer is playing as well as he has, I think he's won his last 4 starts. And they've been good wins. He's made a ton of good saves to earn those victories. They've got a good thing going right now. And you look back to Boston, what did Jim Montgomery do there? He had the 2 goalie system. You know, obviously goalies that were more established than Joel Hofer, but he's young, he's good, and he's helping them right now. So they're going to keep using him.
All right, Tyler, put your earmuffs on. If I got to ask the Dylan Holloway question, and frankly, Broberg too, is there any chance, like in Doug Armstrong's wildest imagination, that he would have thought that this would work out as well as it has?
Not, you know, I want to say no, because these guys have been absolutely phenomenal. But, you know, that's why they have the meetings with their staff. And that's why they say, hey, you know, to Alex Steen, Al McInnes, Peter Chiarelli, you know, what do we do here with Scott Mellenby? What do you guys think we should do? And they decided to give up the draft picks as the compensation to get these guys. Keep in mind, Doug Armstrong traded a second-round pick to Pittsburgh to dump the Kevin Hayes salary at the draft. Then he had to go reacquire that. So that's not something they had months in the making. They went back after the draft to St. Louis and sat down and said, hey, could we pull this off? These guys have been phenomenal. I think if we had Doug here, he deserves a ton of credit. But I don't know that he could have predicted you'd be talking 26 goals for Dylan Holloway, a 4-point night for Philip Broberg, and really good defensively. These guys have been outstanding.
Dylan Holloway, over a point per game since Jim Montgomery took over as head coach. What do you see as his ceiling? Like, is he a guy who you think can, like, he's done it now over a 52-game sample size. Can he be a 90-plus point guy in the near future here?
Yeah, you know, I think that when he came to St. Louis, I wrote a couple stories about him, and I asked some scouts, I asked some executives, and they said, you know, ceiling third line, like maybe second line. But I think he's defined himself as a real second line guy, even though it is a small sample size. And the reason is you guys have been around to see these types of players. He just puts in the work. Like, he's on the practice ice an hour after practice, and now he's got Jordan Kyrou out there working with him an hour after practice. So he's dragging guys along with him too. Quick story too is one time Jim Montgomery was doing an interview with the press. He heard some shots in the background and at the shooting area behind the Blues locker room. And he said, "I bet you that's Dylan Holloway." And I had a PR guy go back and check, because that's an area that we don't go to. And he came back and said, "Yep, it's Holloway."
Speaking of that, by the way, you've got one of the best backdrops in the league. Your kid has his shooting gallery in your basement, and he's a lucky guy.
Yeah, I could put it up against a bland black wall for you guys, but I purposely kind of moved the chair here so you can see the rink. So.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate your insight, Jeremy. Thanks for doing this, and we'll catch up with you probably when the Blues make the playoffs in a few weeks.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, Frank, moving along to our daily face-off inbox question, hashtag askdfo. What do we got cooking around in here? We did have one, again, we talked about it yesterday, but the type of coach you think the Philadelphia Flyers could be targeting. Let's run that back in case people missed yesterday's show. Do you think they're going established name? Do you think they're going young up-and-comer that can grow with the core?
I think they should give a real long look to Ian LaPerriere, who's been coaching their minor league team in Lehigh Valley for the last couple of years. I think he's got the perfect temperament for what this team needs. He's a well-established voice and name in the Philadelphia market. He's someone that fans would get behind. And if you're planning on having a few rough years, have someone that's going to drag some compete out of your team and is familiar with the development process, because he's been doing that in the AHL with the Phantoms. I think he's earned the opportunity, and I'd love to see him get a look.
Yeah, I'd love that suggestion as well. Let's move along to our daily bets. They are brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Must be 19 years or older. Please play responsibly. Frank, I got a couple of picks for tonight. I like the Florida Panthers on the puck line. 23-12 straight up on home ice are the Florida Panthers. The Utah Hockey Club 17-19 on the road. And Florida gets Brad Marchand in the lineup tonight. Also, it's a Friday, so I like giving you my goal scorer parlay. Fantilli, 5 goals in his last 11 games in the month of March. Nick Ehlers came off that OT winner the other night. It was electric. The Jets are playing the Devils. Should be able to get the offense going. He also has 6 goals in his last 12. So Fantilli and Ehlers basically scoring in every other game as of late, played together at a very, very juicy plus 818. Frank, Marchand in the lineup tonight for Florida.
I'd be going anytime goal scorer. It would be electric. And by the way, that line looks awesome. Samoskevich, and then you've got Bennett and Marchand. It's a nightmare for opposing teams.
Brad Marchand comes in. Oh, they don't have him up yet because it hasn't been like fully confirmed. So I'll keep an eye on
fully confirmed. Let's go. Bet365.
Get it up there. Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time and 2 column legends of the game having a nice moment last night. Frank, as the Capitals play the Minnesota Wild. Last time they'll play Marc-Andre Fleury, and Ovi making sure his teammates do not go off the ice. He wanted them to all do the personal handshake with Marc-Andre Fleury afterwards as well. Loved seeing this from Ovi.
This is pure class. I love that he's literally fishing guys out of the tunnel to do it. They're in Minnesota on the road. Their last game going up against Marc-Andre Fleury. And of all the battles, you think back to Ovechkin and all the goals that he scored on Fleury in Pittsburgh and at various stops throughout the league. This is pure class, and love to see it. And I just love the adulation that Marc-Andre Fleury is getting. Our guy Paul Paduti wrote a fantastic story the other day on dailyfaceoff.com talking about and looking back at Fleury's, career and numbers. And to me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't know if we're ever going to see a goalie play 1,000 games again.
No, we honestly might. Like, you even start to run the numbers on a guy like Connor Hellebuck. Like, what's going to hurt a lot of these, legitimate workhorse number 1 goalies, as rare as that is even becoming, is the fact that none of them are going to start their careers as early as Marc-Andre Fleury did. Yeah,
that's the point. Like, when you don't get your NHL job until age 23, you're 5 years behind Fleury already. 5 years. Like, that's insane. So that's potentially 300 games back. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever see it again. I really don't. I don't think we will.
Yeah. Absolutely. A nice moment between Ovi and Fleury. Alex Ovechkin going to continue his chase of the all-time goal record this weekend. The Washington Capitals take on, and of course, my computer is not working, so I don't know who they take on this weekend. Everything froze up. But that's a good end of the week, Frank. I'll just end it there. Thank you to Jeremy Rutherford for swinging by. Our producer, Pat Puff. Great stuff as always. Everybody in the YouTube, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the hockey, and we'll talk with you again on Monday. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.